Welcome back. It's Tuesday, January 31st, and it's a very special day for this podcast, and it's history. For the first time ever, we have a guest on the show, potentially a new co-host in the future, regardless of what happens. A longtime best friend of mine, sports fanatic, Bakari Steve. Welcome to the show. How you feeling?
Thank you for having me. I'm feeling great. I'm ready to discuss our topics. I'm excited.
Right.
I've been following it from the start. Been encouraging everything from the beginning. So,
hey, I appreciate it. But on today's show, we're just gonna cover some quick news first. But then after that, like he mentioned, we're gonna go through, and we're gonna predict where all 30 NBA teams will end up at the end of the season. This is your early reminder to drop a like on the stream, on the podcast, whatever you want to call it. Comment down below. Let us know if you agree, disagree, who we underrating, overrating. Regardless, just let us know down below and subscribe to the channel if you like what you hear, because this is a pivotal day in the podcast history. Without further ado, welcome to the Anomaly Podcast. I'm your host, Owen Stiftar, joined by Bakari. Let's get into it. The first thing we're going to cover is Le Tracker. LeBron, statistically speaking, he a week from today, he would break the record if he stays on his current path of around 30 points a game, I believe he's averaging. Which next Thursday he plays the Thunder. I believe he rests that game. I don't know. We'll get into you in a sec, but I believe he rests that game, and I believe LeBron knows what he's doing. He knows the media. He's been around. I believe he breaks the record on either the 9th, which he plays the Bucks, which Kareem's old team, or he breaks it on the 11th against the Warriors, which is his biggest rival. You think he gets it before that Bucks game? I believe he has the Knicks, Pacers, Raptors, and another team in there before that Bucks game on the 9th.
Like you said, knowing LeBron, he's smart enough to know his schedule. I'm sure he's been looking at the schedule for weeks and maybe even months now. I'm definitely sure that he'll try and go for the Bucks game, and like you said, if he can't get it, then he's definitely going to go for the Warriors game. Because nowadays, when you think of the Warriors, you think of the matchups against LeBron James. And how special it will be for him to break the record versus them. But I mean, yeah, he just sat out the Nets game, so he obviously is preserving his body. He wants to keep going 100%, 150%, as well as getting his team wins. He definitely wants the scoring record. So
right. We'll get into that in just a sec. You know, they got to get wins right now, so I think he's got to balance that. But what do you think? You think he hits a skyhook for the record? For Kareem?
I honestly think LeBron, he might do it on one of his signature pull-up threes.
Right.
LeBron.
Right.
The skyhook, it would be very funny if he did it on the skyhook, but I think depending on how many points away, if he's 2 points away, he's going to go for the break. He's not going to go for the tie.
Right. But yeah, that's it for LeBron. Next up, we're going to talk about Miles Turner, who recently agreed to a 2-year, $60 million extension with the Indiana Pacers. I looked it up this morning. It is a front-loaded deal, which basically means he will be getting paid less and less the next 2 years. He was set to become a free agent this offseason anyway. We both know he's been in trade talks, seems like, this whole season. But he signed the deal, and even if this deal doesn't work out, I believe making $30 million a year, even though it's a lot, I believe you can move it. But what do you think? I believe it's a win-win deal for the Pacers.
Yeah, I believe that too. And I mean, if we're going to be honest, it feels like Miles Turner has been in trade rumors for the last 3 years.
Just like John Collins.
Yeah, it feels like the Pacers have been trying to figure out a direction to go in, and they haven't been or you would say they've been committed towards a direction, and here they are surprising people. So I think this deal works out for them, because who knows if they actually want to make a push, in the future, they still have him. But, I know Rick Carlisle just said that he's out of trade rumors, but, that, as far as we know, that could just be for now. He could be gone by the offseason, depending on what happens, in the future. So
yeah, I don't really trust when coaches or ownership comes out and says that, because remember, this is completely off topic for Miles Turner, but do you remember when Blake Griffin signed that deal with the Clippers, and he signed like a 6-year extension, and then 2 months later, they traded him off a 6-year extension. So anybody can be traded. I believe any deal or any contract can be traded. Some are harder than others, like Russ. But I believe any deal can be traded. But I think it's a good move, especially when they got a young core growing there.
Yeah.
But yeah, excuse me. The uniforms for this year's All-Star Game were released, I believe, this past Wednesday. Just quick thoughts. Do you like them? How they look? I believe they're a huge improvement over the ones we've seen from the last couple years.
Yeah. I like these jerseys. The orange and the yellow jersey is definitely. I kind of figured the game being in Salt Lake City,
yes.
that they would have some representation of the Jazz. I like the color scheme. You have a very bright jersey compared to the dark jersey.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what, they're a lot better than those Indiana Pacers like jerseys we had
right.
a few years ago.
Right.
So.
Yeah. The Jazz, like you said, I mean they've been known for the gradient type jerseys for the last couple years when they go from the dark red to the bright yellow. But this year's All-Star Game, it's going to be different in the fact that we're going to have two captains this year, LeBron and Giannis most likely. Actually, I think they've been announced, Giannis and LeBron. Yeah. But instead of drafting on Zoom and going on TNT like they have in the years prior, this year they're going to draft teams about an hour before the game, and they're going to draft them like playground style. We're going to have the two captains, and we're going to have everybody else line up. So what do you think about the new draft format? I think it's awesome. I think it's fun, and for that person that's picked the last, it's going to be they're going to have a chip on their shoulder.
Yeah, I agree with you right there, because I remember when they started doing the draft, originally they would do it behind closed doors. It wasn't recorded. And then, the draft would come out and all the players would be like, well, we want to see the draft. We want to know who was taken last. So they started televising it. And I think this is what the players want. It was more of the playground type feeling. And,
yes.
You're probably going to get a extremely, or I shouldn't say extremely, but you're definitely going to get a hard-fought all-star game. Players are going to have chips on their shoulders depending on where they go in this, in this draft for a game. But, I'm excited. I'm ready to see a really good All-Star game, hard-fought, competitive All-Star game, and a fun All-Star game.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen like a lot more competitiveness in this All-Star game, even though it's been a lot more no defense for the first three quarters for probably the last decade. But with this new Kobe rule where they going into the fourth quarter, whichever team reaches that certain number first wins the game, I think we've seen a lot more competitiveness. And even though the first three quarters aren't really competitive, that fourth quarter makes up for it, in my opinion. Yeah. But on this day, as we know, this is a series I've been doing for about a month now, but it's basically just we're going to look at the history of January 31st throughout NBA history. And but we're going to start all the way back in 1994. Atlanta Hawks Dominique Wilkins, he became the 11th player in NBA history to score 23,000 career points. If you want to read the second one, you can go ahead.
Yeah,
we can flip-flop there.
Yeah, so in 1997, San Antonio's Dominique Wilkins scored 27 points, giving him a career 26,009 points. He was the only the sixth player in NBA history to score 26,000 points.
I wanted you to read that one because it caught me off guard when I was going through it. I didn't know he played for the Spurs.
Me either.
It must have been the tail end of his career type thing, but yeah. I completely did not know he played for the Spurs, which it's cool that we do stuff like this. But in 2001, in a win over Denver, Milwaukee Bucks head coach George Karl, he got his 600th career NBA coaching victory, and he became the 17th NBA coach to reach that milestone. And I believe he was also the sixth fastest to 600 wins as a coach in NBA history. So, again, I don't typically remember George Karl to be a coach of the Bucks. He was more so of those Denver Nuggets.
Marcus Cousins led teams too.
Right. So, but yeah, in 2015.
2015 in a 91-85 win against the 76ers, the Hawks moved to 17-0 in January, setting a new NBA record. This helped them pass the 71-72 Lakers, who went 16-0 in December of 1971, and the 2013 Heat, who went 17-1 in March of 2013.
That team was weird. As Cavs fans, I mean, we remember that team very vividly. I believe they had 4 All-Stars.
Yeah.
What was it? Korver, Millsap, Horford, and Jeff Teague.
Yep.
So that team was that team was one of the biggest disappointments, I guess. But that's what happens when you run into LeBron James. And then to close it off, in 2018, James Harden, when he was a member of the Houston Rockets, he became the first player in NBA history to put up a 60-point triple-double. He finished, I believe, with 60, 10, and 11, 4 steals and a block in a win over the Orlando Magic. I actually remember watching this game at the time just because Calvin Murphy, who He had the previous Houston Rocket career high at 57 points. He was actually in attendance for this game. So I remember actually watching this because he was on that scoring streak where he was dropping 30 plus a game, and he had that crazy month or two. But I remember watching that game. Houston Rockets, James Harden, one of the most underrated players ever. But I believe this year, we've seen 60-point triple-doubles since then, right? I believe Luka had one this year.
Yeah, Luka had one.
Did Russ ever have one? I don't think he's ever got 60.
Yeah, he's had a 50, but I think he had the first 50-point triple-double in a while. But, the league's taken over since then. So
Right. Regardless, it was a great performance. But for the main portion of today's show, we wanted to predict all 30 NBA teams and where they will end up in the NBA standings at the end of the regular season, which is very important. We're not predicting the playoffs here. We're predicting what we're going to think of these teams at the end of the NBA season. It's based off what we know now, what we believe can transpire with the trade deadline or whatever to close off this year. But we broke it down into 4 categories, 4 tiers, so to speak. We have our lottery teams, which the teams that simply just don't make the playoffs, to the bottom feeders. We have our play-in teams, which they're typically going to be in the 7 to 10 seed range. They're the teams that either unfortunately were put into the play-in, being the 7th or 8th seed, or they were teams that snuck in and trying to make some noise. We have our playoff teams, which are teams that avoided the play-in, luckily enough, and they're good teams, but they're just not our title contenders, which is our last tier, which we have our title contenders. We're going to get to that, obviously, in a little bit. Hopefully that's simple enough, but we're going to start off in the Eastern Conference here, where my 5 teams that are lottery teams, in my opinion, these are teams that are going to go after Victor Wembanyama, the sensation over there in, what is he, Greek? Or Greece?
French.
Or French,
Yep.
Sorry. I don't know where I got Greek from. But I have the Washington Wizards, the Chicago Bulls, the Charlotte Hornets, Pistons, and the Orlando Magic. Yeah, go ahead.
And my teams, I have the Washington Wizards, Toronto Raptors, Charlotte Hornets, Detroit Pistons, and Orlando Magic.
I look in here, the only teams that we differ on are the Bulls and the Toronto Raptors. We don't have to dive too deeply into these two teams because they're both struggling right now. Basically, I'll just say I had the Bulls just because, one, I want them to do this bad, because I believe I want them to blow it up. There's been rumors to trade Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso. DeMar DeRozan's getting older. They don't have a core to win a championship, in my opinion, so I hope they finish here on the bottom of the East. But why do you have the Raptors here instead of the Bulls, let's say?
I have the Raptors here because I feel like their success last year, I feel like it was earned, but it came at a weird place. Last year, I feel like a lot of teams in the East down the stretch ended up getting hurt, and as a biased Cleveland fan, we were above the Raptors all season until the end, until we weren't.
Right.
And I feel like this year, or I feel like during the off season and the beginning of this year, they felt like they didn't have to make any changes due to what happened last year, and that ended up costing them. They got off to a rocky start. They've been playing very inconsistent, especially Scotty Barnes. He's been very inconsistent.
Definitely down year.
Yeah, Pascal, he's been having a really good year. But I just feel like they need a bona fide number 1 player instead of a team of 2s and 3s. I don't think they'll be able to pick up their play. Or at least make it consistent enough to get back into the play-in tournament picture.
Right, and I think that's why they've been in rumors for years now to go. That's when they were filled of 2s and 3s, like you said, second and third options. So then that in 2019 when they got Kawhi Leonard, they were elevated to a top championship contender. They are that piece away. Yeah. We all know it. I mean, that's why they've been linked to Bradley Beal and Damian Lillard, Kevin Durant early in the season. So they've been linked to a lot of those top guys that could maybe put them over the edge. I don't know if Bradley Beal does that, but they definitely have been linked to the top. But I think a team like the Raptors, for example, what did J.J. Redick say? I believe he said parity creates delusion with these NBA teams, where it's like the play-in tournament gives a lot of these bottom feeders or these mediocre teams, because some teams like the Pacers and the Raptors, I believe, they're just okay with being mediocre,
right?
Because they're not big markets. And I believe that they're okay with being play-in teams.
Yeah.
Which, as NBA fans, might be frustrating because, well, Van Fleet's probably the worst starting point guard in the league. And Gary Trent, I mean, they're trying to trade him even though he's one of their only young pieces there. And OG Anunoby, they're trying to get rid of him too. So
for a crazy package.
Right.
That's
all right. 2 first-round picks. But yeah, moving over to the West, I have the Portland Trailblazers, the OKC Thunder, the Utah Jazz, the Rockets, and the Spurs. Rockets and the Spurs, in my opinion, they're self-explanatory. The other 3 teams, the Blazers, Thunder, and the Jazz, they are in the playoff picture, I want to say, at least in the play-in picture. But I'm going to go ahead and let you read off yours first, and then we'll dive into that.
So I have Portland, Oklahoma City, Minnesota Timberwolves, Houston Rockets, and San Antonio Spurs.
Yeah, before you get into yours, the point I was trying to make was that a team like the Utah Jazz, where they've been this year's like Cinderella story, it would be cool to see a Utah team in the playoffs, but at the same time, it's best for their team to tank for a Victor Wembanyama, like we all thought they should have early in the season, and being in this spot, their odds might be too shot. They might be too far gone from a top pick at this point, but I just believe the teams might be better than like the Jazz. Other teams like the Blazers here, they're like the Wizards. I just want them to be here. I want them to blow it up, make some changes. And for the Thunder, I mean, besides Shea, I mean that team doesn't have much, but Shea's fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree with you for the Jazz, but actually that is my reason they aren't in this tier. But we can get into that later. But in place of the Jazz, I have the Timberwolves.
It's a good pull.
The Rudy Gobert experiment, it wasn't, I guess you could say it was an epic failure to start off. Cat is not his big man instincts aren't that of a 5, but he is not a 4. So it's hard to kind of explain the fit that Rudy Gobert creates there. Anthony Edwards is a dynamic shot creator, but he's not a very consistent outside the arc shooter. So when you do that, when you take somebody's main slashing ability away from them by clogging up the paint, it takes longer for the team to adjust because that team they're young and scrappy, but they're not always smart. I actually think the Karl Anthony Towns injury was the best thing to happen to them, unfortunately.
Right. I was going to say,
they've been playing better than they were. It's still not probably where they want to be at or where they were expecting to be at.
Right.
But I think that, Cat nearing a return, when he comes back, they're going to go right back into the very inconsistent play because they never figured out a formula when he was playing. And like you said, for Portland and OKC, Portland, they're like the Western Conference version of the Trailblazers. Trailblazers type team. They're always, they've had some pretty good years in the past, but I think it's time to let go of Dame and start fresh, start something from the ground up, even though Dame is homegrown and as
he doesn't want to leave.
Yeah, I mean, Shea for the Thunder, he's their next star after Russell Westbrook, but he just doesn't have a good enough supporting cast around him to take that jump to the play-in.
He's an all-star, though. I'm happy he's an all-star this year. Yeah. He's finally got time to show who he is as a player.
Correct, yeah. Right. I think that time with CP3 really helped him out.
But before we move on, I just wanted to go back to the Timberwolves just because they're one of the most interesting teams to talk about. I think that in this past offseason when they got the new management, when they got the new GM, sometimes GMs are so desperate to make a move and put their mark on a franchise that I think on paper, I mean, when you think about it, Cat is more of a perimeter big, where he likes to shoot the ball and he likes to play on the outside. And you pair him with a big that covers the flaws of Cat, which is Rudy Gobert, who's a defensive monster. I believe on paper it kind of looks good. Not the trade package. That might be one of the worst trades ever. But I believe on paper it looked good. It just hasn't been that. And like you said, they've looked better with Cat out. So I think they're just better with one of them, not both of them.
Exactly.
But moving on to our play-in teams in the Eastern Conference, to start off, I have the Raptors, the Knicks, the Hawks, and the Indiana Pacers. Go ahead and read yours off.
I have Miami, Atlanta, Chicago Bulls, and the Indiana Pacers.
So we already talked about the Raptors. We don't need to get too much into them. The Knicks are a very interesting team, but I do see we both have the Pacers and the Hawks. Rationale for the Hawks here, I believe that, hey, they're Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, they're the fit for them, again, on paper it looks good, where DeJounte Murray could cover the flaws of a Trae Young and take the pressure off him with the ball handling responsibilities.
Yeah.
But it just, the fit hasn't been there. Statistically, Trae Young's having a good year. 27-10, that's just what Trae Young does.
Yeah.
But he's having a bad year off the eye test. It's not fun to watch Trae Young and this Hawks team like it was in years past, where they're shooting threes and they're trying to rebuild. They're trying to make the next Warriors. Right. But, I mean, I still think they could use a guy like a Kevin Huerter, which they traded away. So,
exactly.
Right. And then for the Pacers, Tyrese Halliburton's hurt. They were at like 4th or 5th in the conference. Once Tyrese Halliburton got hurt, their all-star, they've lost like 9 of the last 10 or something.
Yeah.
So they're falling down the conference. I believe they're the 9 or 10 seed right now. I just believe they need to get Tyrese back. And that's it for those two teams. Well, why do you have the Heat here? That is one thing that's standing out to me compared to the other teams here.
I have the Heat here because I think the thing for them, the end of last season, during the playoffs and the beginning of this season, was they didn't really know what they were going to get from Kyle Lowry. I think in the playoffs, once he hurt his hamstring, and even before that, he wasn't playing particularly well. And I'm sure everybody knows the playoff woes that Kyle Lowry has had in his career up until he had his ring. But this time, it kind of felt different. You kind of feel like if they had a better upgrade, they might have been able to get past Boston and make the finals. Who knows what happens from there? But I think their big thing with him was his body weight, and coming in this season, he just didn't look right. I know those hamstring injuries. Yeah, I know those hamstring injuries usually take a number on a player, and it takes a while. I mean, look at James Harden. He doesn't look the same as he did before the injury, even though he's more efficient. But I think them not sure where they were going in the point guard direction, and with Jimmy and Bam and just others missing time for this and that, and Tyler Hero, I guess being that next man up, that number 2, they've just been inconsistent. We know what they can do when they lock in, they just have to find a time where they can all lock in, which unfortunately I don't think that'll come
until the playoffs.
Exactly.
Because I think they're a team built for the playoffs.
Right.
They don't typically care for the regular season, so I can see why you have them here. But for a team like the Knicks, where I think we flip-flopped, where we had one as the 6th seed and the 7th seed.
Right.
For me, I had just had the Knicks here because I just believe the teams above them were just better. Not that the Knicks are a bad team.
Yeah.
They're just right where they're at. That 6-7 range for me. They're going to be fighting with the teams above them for that last spot that can avoid the play-in, the 6th seed.
Right.
But yeah, any other notes on these teams here? I think we pretty much covered the majority of them.
Yeah. For Chicago, I had Chicago
explain to me
here.
why you got them here.
I had Chicago here because I feel like last year, I don't want to say it was fluke the way they started off. Obviously, they were, I think,
couldn't beat a good team.
Yeah, they just, I don't know. It just didn't always feel right. They had a good record for the majority of last season, but it just they felt like they were missing a piece that they needed. And Lonzo going down really hurt them because he's that 3-and-D playmaker that you need with stars like LaVine and DeRozan, and as well as Vucevic. And this year you are seeing how much they miss Lonzo. Alex Caruso plays his role, but let's be real. It's just Alex Caruso.
He's a 6th man for a reason.
Exactly. Zach LaVine, I don't know if it's the system or what, but he's been putting up numbers, but they're it's like the Trae Young eye test. It just doesn't look right. A lot of them come during garbage time. Mm-hmm. DeRozan, he's still DeRozan, but it's hard to look at him the same because the team is losing. Vucevic's value on defense is really costing him because he'll go and get you 18 and 12, but on defense he's giving up 30 and 15. So,
right.
I just think this team probably, like you said, needs to blow it up, but they're not bad enough for me to completely miss out of the play-in. I think the lowest they go is 10. So
you're right. No, that's definitely a good point. It was one of those things where, like when we talked about the Wizards and the Blazers, where I just want to see them at that point because I believe it does. It seems like in the NBA now, it's almost smarter to blow it up early than to wait a couple extra years, because we saw with the Blazers, they had so many opportunities to get rid of Dame at his peak.
Yeah.
When they had the okay teams that would go in the 2nd round or 3rd round of the playoffs in the West, but we all knew they just weren't good enough to win the finals. For a team like the Bulls, I don't think, even for a guy like DeMar DeRozan, if you put him on a team, let's say like the Raptors, he goes back to Toronto, and Toronto's a very complete team. They just don't have that star. They don't have that guy to put him over. If you even put DeRozan there, I still don't think they're a contender.
Right.
I think DeMar, just with his style of play, can't be a number one option on a winning team. And I think the Bulls, I think they just they've dropped the ball a little bit. I think since DeRozan's been there, not that he's not the better player, but I think you need to let Zach LaVine be that one option and have DeRozan complement him throughout the game. That's
makes sense.
But moving over to our West play-in teams, I have the Phoenix Suns, the Dallas Mavericks, the Los Angeles Lakers, and the Minnesota Timberwolves.
And I have the Los Angeles Lakers, Dallas Mavericks, Utah Jazz, and the Phoenix Suns.
Quickly, do you have any winners here? Like, or we'll save that for just a minute. But I see we both have Dallas here. I am going to speak for you here. I believe we both have them here because of Luka, and in that heliocentric offense, Luka is going to be Luka.
Yep.
They're here strictly because of him. If he gets hurt, this team's a bottom feeder. If he starts playing even better than where we have them ranked, I wouldn't be shocked if they. I mean, last year Western Conference Finals team, and it was just Luka. So.
Or you forget about the first round though, when Luka was hurt and they had Brunson and Dinwiddie running the show.
A good point.
But there's a reason why Rudy Gobert isn't in Utah anymore.
Right.
Play 1-on-1 on the perimeter. So.
But yeah, I mean that's a good point, and I think a team like this that we're watching. Sure, Josh Green, he's showing flashes, and you have other guys like Christian Wood, who's kind of revived his career, or his value, rather. But I think they are missing a consistent point guard like a Jalen Brunson. I think you see in Memphis, when Ja goes down, you have guys like Trey Jones that step up. I think we undervalue the impact of just a consistent point guard. Like the Cavs, when we have Ricky Rubio. I mean, for some reason, we just play better with that veteran point guard.
Right.
But for the teams here, Mavericks are the Mavericks. I have the Timberwolves here strictly just because the talent. I believe they can just prevail them to the playoffs. And I could see them maybe pulling off a Jay Crowder trade, and maybe he brings that grittiness they need, or that grittiness they need. But they're here for, I think they just sneak in. And for the Suns, we'll get to them first. D-Book, he's been out for a long time, but I don't want you guys to forget that when Devin Booker was playing, when he was consistently playing at the beginning of the year, this team was a top 2 seed in the West. So they've been a consistent regular season monster. They've been a great regular season team, but there's only so much Mikal Bridges. I don't know why I said Michael, but Mikal Bridges can do as a second option.
Right.
DeAndre Ayton doesn't want to be there. I mean, and Chris Paul is just too old to be the one option, I think, on a successful team.
I think, for Phoenix, like you said, they were top 2 when D-Book was playing. And, let's take a moment to appreciate the evolution of D-Book's career, because early in his career, he was not the type of player to be able to – he could lead you to the 13th seed, but that was it. Right. I think, this time he spent winning and learning and maturing has CP3 could be out, but if D-Book was there, they'd probably still be top 4.
Right.
I just think this team has gone through a lot this season, off the court adversity, on the court adversity. Like you said, DeAndre Ayton doesn't want to be there. He's
that needs to be the first.
Really, he's not proving his value at all. Mikal Bridges, he'll go 12 of 15 one night and 3 of 23 the next. He wasn't there for offense in the first place. He was there for defense and
all NBA defender.
Exactly. When you, I'm still not sure why they blackballed Jay Crowder out. That never really, it never really made sense to me, but they did what they did, and they haven't got a return from that. So, it's their fault, I guess you could say, for some of it. But, this team, I hate to say it, but it looks like they're probably going to need to blow it up, or at least get rid of some of their top players that not named Devin Booker, try and get a return and try and get a fit around him. Almost like the Bulls did last year, even though that only worked out for a season. But if you can find players around D-Book's age and everything like that, I'm sure it'll work out fine, because he's definitely taken a step forward as a player.
I mean, like Jay Crowder, as you mentioned, they could use him a lot right now. Not that he's going to get them wins, but when you have a guy like Cam Johnson, one of their young forwards, he had a knee injury. He's out for the year. He could step in, and that could just complete their team a little bit more. I mean, the Suns' best bench player is Josh Okogie, which, don't get me wrong, he had a lot of raw potential, but he was a bench player in Minnesota when they sucked for a reason. he's just not the greatest, right? And the last thing on the Suns for me is that I believe they can. I mean, DeAndre Ayton, he signed with Indiana, but his deal was matched in the offseason. And so he wants out. So I think you got to move him. I think Indiana still takes him, to be completely honest, because they're not a big market. And CP3, in my opinion, I mean, due to his personal connections, and next year will be his last year, or he'll have 2 years left. I believe with CP3's personal connections with the team we're going to talk about next, he could be moved this offseason if they were to, I guess, retool around D-Book, not rebuild, but retool.
Yeah.
One thing before we get into that team we're all looking at, tell me why you have the Jazz here. That's a very it's standing out.
Yeah, like you said before when you're talking about the lottery teams, they're too far into the season to turn back now. It's kind of like, you're in too deep already. I think, over halfway or, halfway into the season, a little bit over, they've kind of proved. I've watched games every now and then, and they've kind of, there's a good sample size now to say that, this team might be able to get a 10th seed or a 9th seed. Right. I think they've played their style of basketball very consistently. I think the way this season is going, it may even change that direction from tanking to, maybe they become like a Memphis Grizzlies grit and grind type team when they had Conley and Zach Randolph. Obviously, they won't be grit and grind, but they could create their own style. Obviously, in the NBA, you need stars to win, and that's what they don't have now. So they'll probably just settle for being mediocre. But, this is a Jazz team that doesn't get blown out. Every game is a close game.
Yes.
Larry Markkinen has really taken that step forward.
All-star.
Everybody knows their role. And then, when everybody knows their role, you have a dangerous team because nobody tries to go outside of that. And, everybody only gets better from season to season, especially with a young team like this. So, for that reason, I have them right there.
Yeah, you made a lot of great points there, especially because I wanted to say that they kind of play like a college basketball team. So you made a lot of great points there about just everyone plays their role. Larry Markkinen is their quote-unquote star, but he's a second or third option at best. I mean, they just play team basketball, and oddly enough, that's working. So, I mean, I agree with you. They're too far in now to turn back. At this point, I don't think they would have a chance with the lottery numbers to even get a chance at Victor Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson.
Right.
So, I believe you're right. They're too far in now this season. But the last team, we kind of stalled there, or I stalled, I guess I'll say. But we both have the Lakers in this play-in tier. Just quick rundown. I mean, for me personally, I think the Lakers, they have a lot of injuries this year. They started off this year like 2-12, and they've been playing better as of late. But that hole it's just too big. I believe at this point they nearly have to play perfect, and they need a lot of teams to start losing. Yeah. Teams like the Suns, the Mavericks, the Timberwolves, teams that are ahead of them in the conference, they need them to start losing games, and they need to start winning. And I guess the most important thing is they need to get healthy. And I think after this record that LeBron gets, and they make a trade or two, it's gonna kind of reset this team and change the focus. I believe right now LeBron's, I don't want to say he's not focused on winning, but I think it's definitely on his mind that he wants to get this record out of the way as fast as possible.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like as far as the teams that are ahead of them, that's why I have the Lakers here, is because those teams are teams like Phoenix or Minnesota or Portland or Oklahoma City. The Lakers, listen, they're 5 games under 500, which is, significantly better than the 11 I think that they were at one point in time this season. And I mean, if you look at it this way, I want to say 2 weeks ago, they had 4 losses in 1 week that were decided on calls or non-calls by referees.
I didn't mention that.
You give them those foul calls for 4 or 5 games, they're either at 500 or a game below. I feel like this team, when healthy, everybody is starting to know their role, which is unusual to say for a veteran team. But I think the first significant step about it was getting Russell Westbrook to buy into the bench role. Yes. And since he's done that, the team just looks like a better oiled machine. Obviously, I'm not sure LeBron will like this, but I mean, he's kind of having to play with the hand he's been dealt with. And I think AD coming back, he was on a monster tear when he got that freak injury. I think AD comes back. Thomas Bryant is a really serviceable, big, the trade for Rui Hachimura. That was a good trade. Gives them, size. I think this team is able to lock in and actually gain momentum, whereas the younger teams ahead of them might not know how to keep up with the traction and start slipping in the standings. And I think that's where the Lakers squeeze into that 9-10 range.
Yeah, I think that a lot of pressure is on LeBron James right now, and that's at 38 years old. You don't want that. You want to kind of preserve him for the playoffs. That's why you trade Lonzo, B.I., and Kyle Kuzma and all those picks for a guy like Anthony Davis. He can't stay healthy. Really quick, I want to say this. We see the 4 teams on here. Tell me your winners here. If you just had to pick 2 teams on your side, we know the play-in has 2 winners. Which 2 teams sneak in the playoffs for you?
Obviously, I think the reasonable choice would be Dallas and Phoenix, just because of prior playoff experience. Like we said about the Jazz, they don't have that true number one. They just have a team full of people who know their role. But they shouldn't. They shouldn't be ready for a play-in type game or 2 play-in type games.
Right.
But I mean, I guess if this season has taught us anything, we never know. And for the Lakers, like you said, their hole is just too big to overcome.
Yes.
Maybe they do get lucky and somehow squeeze into the playoffs, but I really don't see that, especially after starting off how bad they did. They definitely, won't have any home court advantage during the play-in, which I think hurts them. And, like you said, for LeBron, that's putting a lot of pressure on a 38-year-old man.
Yeah, right.
I think it's time we start talking about Anthony Davis like a 2, because he hasn't really proved that he could be a 1 since his trade to
No, absolutely,
LA.
absolutely. I think I'm gonna stick with you here. I think I'm gonna go Phoenix and Dallas. Dallas, I can't see Luka losing in the playoffs. At least in the play-in, I'll say that. Maybe in the first round or so, unless he's playing the Clippers. But give me Luka to take care of business that he needs to in a 1 or 2 game setting. And I want to say the Lakers, but we just don't know how healthy they're going to be at that point.
Right.
I do want to see LeBron get another ring. I just don't think it happens here. I think the Suns probably get the best of the Lakers yet again. Book should be back by then, and he should be back after All-Star break, but Book should be back to full form in the play-in, and they're going to take care of business. Moving over to the East playoff teams, just a quick reminder, these are teams that are good, and we just don't think they're title contenders, right? So in the Eastern Conference, I have the Brooklyn Nets, the Philadelphia 76ers, the Cavs, and the Miami Heat.
And I actually only have 3 teams here. I have Philadelphia 76ers, the New York Knicks, and the Cleveland Cavaliers.
The New York Knicks stand out to me. Just let me know quickly why you have the Knicks.
I have the Knicks here. I have them here because for me, when it came to the play-in teams, it was between them and Miami, switching them out. And I could have had another team here, but I don't know. I feel like the Knicks, they started off the season really inconsistently. Then they went on like that 8-game win streak, followed by a typical New York 4 or 5 game losing streak.
Right.
But I think Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson have started figuring out how to work together. I'm not sure what Tom Thibodeau is really doing with the rotation. The team could be a lot better if he used,
Cam Reddish.
Players like Cam Reddish, Derrick Rose. If he just used the bench a little bit better instead of playing guys who may not be ready for it, like Miles McBride, the team could be a lot better. But I think with Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson leading the charge, and they consistently play, and that's the big thing for me from Miami, is that everybody in New York consistently plays.
Yes.
They really don't have. Mitchell Robinson is injury prone, but when he comes back, they'll probably be even better.
He should be back in about 2 weeks. I think, with the thumb injury.
Yeah, and I think Cam Reddish this season has probably been a disappointment for him. He started off the season really, really bad. He kind of picked it up, but then
I do want to ask you that because he did start off the season poorly, but then he picked it up.
Yeah.
And then when he was really at the top of his game for this season, I guess he suffered that injury and he hasn't played since. When he came back, it was only a hamstring injury or something.
Yeah,
but he was able to play. Tom Thibodeau just hasn't played him. Do you think? Just really quick, if Cam Reddish, this is now his second stop, let's say he gets traded at the deadline. I believe the Knicks said they want 2 seconds, but let's say he gets traded to Cleveland or another team like that needs a wing, and if it doesn't work out or if he's not playing, is it time to give up on Cam Reddish?
It's an interesting question because I think a lot of times when you say, is it time to give up on a player, you also remember that they're only 23.
Yes. Right.
So, years down the line when they're 28, 29 after, stops in maybe an international league or in the G League, they kind of come back out of nowhere and they're like, like it's almost like a Stanley Johnson type thing that happened for the Lakers last year.
Yes.
I honestly just think that Tom Thibodeau isn't the answer in New York.
I don't.
They have the
agree.
talent to consistently be above the 6 seed range, but Tom Thibodeau, I think he holds them back with a really one-sided mindset, and that's defense, and everything else will come. They need an offensive-minded coach because everybody on that team can play defense, and I honestly, it also relies on R.J. Barrett for their team success too. I think, you get Tom Thibodeau out of there, get players like Derrick Rose and Cam Reddish playing again. Maybe R.J. Barrett can kind of find his way because he's been struggling this season as well. Luckily, they have 2 other, quote-unquote stars on their team to kind of mask up for it. But,
right.
I think for Cam Reddish, 23, he still has a lot of years in front of him. He just needs to find the right system to me.
Yeah, I mean, was it 2018, 2019 draft or one of those years?
Yeah.
Where I wanted the Cavs to draft us or draft him, and I think we took Sexton that year.
That was the Darius Garland
draft. That was the Darius Garland draft. So looking back, I actually don't regret it, right? But I wanted us to draft Cam Reddish. He was compared to, I couldn't find the word, but he was compared to like a guy like Paul George, where he's a tall, lanky guard. He can handle the ball. He can play some defense, shoot the outside shot. Cam Reddish has the potential. Like you said, though, he's in a position where he doesn't have the opportunity, and that just makes him look like it makes him look like a bust, I guess, if we want to throw that word out there.
Right.
But very quickly here, Miami, they're a regular season team. I just don't think they're contenders. They proved me wrong last year, though, making it to the Eastern Conference Finals. But I just don't think they're contenders when it comes down to it in the 7-game series. Teams like Philadelphia, we both have them here. Where Philadelphia, James Harden, at times he's been lackluster, but at times he looks like he has that Houston bounce in his game, where he is back to the dominant guard that we knew and we loved for many years. Joel Embiid, I mean, he just had 47 and 18 against Jokic.
Yep.
Arguably the best big in the game. It's arguably a top 5 player in the game, which we can do that maybe in the coming weeks. But Joel Embiid, James Harden, when you have a duo like that, you're going to be an amazing team.
Yeah, obviously, I was actually very, very much considering putting them in the contending teams lineup just because you have names like James Harden and Joel Embiid, leading off, your roster. Actually, I think the addition of Tyrese Maxey will help their playoff chances, but I'm just not sold on how Joel Embiid. Maybe it's time to start looking at Joel Embiid's style of play when it comes to the playoffs. I know that's a hard thing to say, but even when he had Ben Simmons, they had some really good teams, and they just couldn't get it done. And I think part of that comes with Joel Embiid taking on a different responsibility in the playoffs. I know that's a hard thing to ask because he is their best player. Right. But same thing for James Harden. James Harden, his style of play didn't have the high. I mean, they almost beat the Warriors at their peak.
Right. If they didn't miss 27 threes.
Exactly.
I mean, he's one goes in, we have a different story.
Exactly. I think he's finding out that he's no longer 1A, he's 1B. Mm-hmm. You might even say 1C when Tyrese Maxey is full go.
Right.
But you forget they have players like Tyrese Maxey, Georges Niang, Montrezl Harrell, who's a former 6th Man of the Year winner. I think this team has the depth to make the playoffs, but as far as contending, I just don't see them there yet. And they're only getting older. So
that's right. Yeah, I worry about the depth with a team like that when it comes to playoff time, which in their favor, the rotations usually shorten in the playoffs anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that always could help the Sixers, but I still worry about their depth if any injuries were to happen. I will point out that I'm the only person here that has the Brooklyn Nets, which we'll get at in just a sec. We both have the Cavs. Cavs fans, call us biased, whatever you want. I believe we're dangerous this year. Yeah. I believe when we get healthy, I mean, Donovan Mitchell, he just needs to sit. He just needs to sit for a week or two, get healthy, and finally return to the lineup. But I think we're a dangerous team. I'm not going to say we're contenders, but I believe we can win a series or two and maybe go on and take a Bucks team or Celtics team to 6 or 7 games.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. Obviously, when the season started and we had Donovan Mitchell, My hopes were higher than last season. I had a sore taste in my mouth from last season when we got bounced from the play-in after 2 games, and we had a significant lead on the Atlanta Hawks in a game we shouldn't have lost. But that's neither here or there.
Right.
Obviously, the addition of Donovan Mitchell I thought last year we should have got rid of Lauri Markkanen. I had no idea he was going to turn into what he is.
Opportunity.
I was one of the few people who still believed in Colin Sexton in Cleveland. Obviously, he didn't play all last season, and we ended up, making the play-in. Mm-hmm. So letting him go, it hurt to see, but it worked out. We have a top 10 MVP candidate, maybe the best shooting guard in the league right now in Donovan Mitchell.
Right.
We started off the season really good. Once Darius Garland came back from that to the lineup after that eye injury, it took a little bit of adjusting, and I'll be the first to admit, DG, he just didn't seem the same from last season
right.
to start off. But as of late, he's really picked it up, and
yes.
he might be a late All-Star. He just like last year. He might be one of those.
Reserve.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's really picked up his game. Evan Mobley as well. He's really taken a step forward on offense, and he's a monster on defense. I think we just need a wing to really put us in that contending category. Listen, Caris LeVert, he's good, but the Cleveland experiment, it just hasn't been right from the jump, and I think it's time.
Yeah, I just quick thoughts here. I will say this: we need a wing. Cam Reddish. Send 2 seconds to New York. Get Cam Reddish in Cleveland.
Yeah.
He can't do any worse than Cedi Osman. But in my opinion, well, no, I actually this morning on the radio I heard that there's speculations going around of a 3-team trade where we send Caris LeVert to Atlanta to give them some bench scoring. Mm-hmm. Atlanta would send John Collins to Utah to pair up with Lauri Markkanen, and we would get Malik Beasley. So basically, what do you think about a Caris LeVert Malik Beasley swap? Both of them are in the last year of their deal. It's kind of just like a try it thing.
Yeah. If you're only going to keep if you're only going to have him for half a season, he may leave.
Right.
I don't really see the point because, listen, Caris LeVert, he's been very inconsistent scoring this season, but his playmaking and defense has been there. It's
right.
just the scoring that we need from a wing when our 2 guards don't have it going or, they're the focus of the offense. So, you're giving up a lot of playmaking and defense from Malik Beasley, who, he's a better...
Inconsistent, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So. But yeah, so we're going to move on to our West playoff teams, where I have the Sacramento Kings. I never thought I'd see the day, but the Sacramento Kings, the New Orleans Pelicans, and the Memphis Grizzlies.
And yeah, we're the same when we have the Sacramento Kings, New Orleans Pelicans, but where we differ is the Memphis Grizzlies, and I have the Denver Nuggets.
I'll start here. I had the Memphis Grizzlies actually as title contenders until this morning. I just thought about it, and I'm like, they have the talent. But it just seems like they're missing something. Maybe I'm delusional. Maybe I'm just not watching the Grizzlies close enough. But I just don't believe that when it comes to a 7-game series against teams like the Warriors or my other title contenders we'll get into in a sec, where I don't think they can stay with them, right? For example, like the Denver Nuggets, which I have as title contenders, I believe that, sure, Steven Adams is actually a very underrated center. He plays his part, but they don't have that star guy like Jokic that could probably put them over. I believe John Morant's top 15 player, but Jokic is arguably the best player in the league. And the supporting cast in Denver, way better than I believe in this, at least for star power, than the supporting cast in Memphis. But nonetheless, I could see them being title contenders. They have guys like John Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson, who's, I don't know if you heard, but there's been rumors going around if the stat keeper in Memphis is point shaving.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard that, yeah.
So basically, because since Jaren Jackson has returned, his block numbers are at like 3.5 a game, but at home. But if you go on the road, his numbers almost cut in half for blocks and steals and that type of stuff. So it's very interesting, but I would prefer, I think, teams like Denver and other title contenders over a team like Memphis, and that's really all it came down to for me.
Yeah, for me, I don't know. Listen, I know Jokic is a top 2 player in the league. I guess
right.
If you want to give him that, he might be on his way to a third MVP
in a row.
In a row, first time since like Larry Bird.
Right.
But I don't know. I just feel like you have Jokic, but Michael Porter Jr. he's inconsistent.
Yes.
Jamal Murray, this is his first year back from injury. And injuries like that, where he was out almost 2 seasons, it takes you a full year to actually get back to where you were. So,
Absolutely.
You're going to be inconsistent during that first year. Aaron Gordon, he's been in
be an
a
all-star,
dunker role, right?
right?
Exactly. But it's Aaron Gordon.
Right.
You're not paying. You're paying Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. to be better than Aaron Gordon. Exactly. They have better bench pieces. They have Bruce Brown and Kentavious Caldwell.
Bruce Brown's actually taken a step this year, surprisingly.
Yeah. I don't know. I just look at their team and I say, they're a good team. Don't get me wrong. They're a really good team. I just can't see them beating a team like, maybe even like the Pelicans.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a good. I mean, they definitely lack defense, especially in their stars.
Yeah.
The only defense in their starting lineup is really Aaron Gordon,
right?
And that's why he's been arguably an all-star this year. But I just think that Jokic is that dang good. Like, he's that good. He's that dude. So.
And I completely understand.
And he can, he can really. I mean, they've been in multiple 7-game series before. But they've also struggled in the playoffs to close out series where the Jazz had that one year where did they come back against the Jazz where they were down 3-1 and they came back 3-1 twice in the same postseason. That was the bubble year.
Yeah, that was the bubble year.
So
that was the
my
Jazz
argument literally just got squashed in a second. But I don't know. My argument is Nikola Jokic. That's my argument. But the Cinderella story of this year, aside from the Jazz, is the Sacramento Kings. I mean, they've been really lackluster our whole lives. Mm-hmm. It's really just cool to see them here. I mean, honestly, De'Aaron Fox, arguably an all-star. I would give it to Sabonis over Fox. But overall, they've been a great team to watch this year. Fun team.
Yeah, I agree with you. Listen, the Kings for the past few years, they've had the talent. They just didn't really know how to disperse that talent and turn it into wins.
I guess that's Mike Brown.
Yeah,
right.
I guess so.
Right.
Maybe he learned something in Cleveland, but in Golden State. But the Kings have always had talent. But and you could even say, the Tyrese Halliburton trade was a flashpoint for them because when it happened, it was kind of a move like you didn't need to do that. You don't,
Like, what are you doing?
Exactly. You're getting a big man version of Tyrese Halliburton, I guess, if you want to say.
Right.
And even after the trade, they were the exact same mediocre team that they were before the trade. Mm-hmm. This year, with the additions of like Kevin Huerter and the meshing time. They've really turned into, and they are a really, and Malik Monk too. They are a really good 3-point shooting team. It's about time that the Kings fans get what they've deserved for the past few years.
Longest playoff drought in sports right now.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I believe so. And it's just nice to see Sacramento getting some love. They're no longer a pushover team. I
think they're just one step away.
Exactly.
I think this is just the year where they're happy to be there.
Exactly, right.
And
you can't argue with that.
Right. And then the last team here, we both have New Orleans. I mean, both of the stars of New Orleans, B.I. and Zion, they've missed a lot of time this year, and they're still top 4 or top 5 in the West.
Yeah.
So the teams are very complete with guys like Herb Jones, Jose Alvarado, Jonas Valanciunas, who's very underrated. They have the talent. They have the supporting cast. I think the only worry here for me is that their stars are missing time, so when they come back, they're gonna have to mesh. They're gonna have to get back into. They're gonna have to get some games under them to play at the level that they were at, like Brandon Ingram, who we haven't seen in months over a toe injury. But it could be another case like the Clippers, where both of their stars don't really ever play, but when they do play, it looks like they haven't missed a beat.
Yeah, and I agree with you right there. Even though Herb Jones is spectacular on defense, even though he's shooting I think 29% from 3 this season, the team is really good around him to make up for that as a starting 2 guard. Jose, CJ, all of those guys.
I didn't even mention CJ.
Yeah, all of those guys are really good. Listen, CJ was the veteran presence that they needed.
Yes.
Maybe he doesn't have the defense of Alonzo Ball, but he has that leadership, and leadership is very underrated because it's not something you put into stats. But Brandon Ingram, last year you could say that he almost beat Phoenix by himself.
Yes,
they were a really fun and exciting team to watch last year.
Took him to 6, I think.
Yeah, they took him to 6. And,
no Zion.
And no Zion, and listen, they were out of those games, a couple of games, and they fought all the way back and made it really interesting. Zion, he proved a lot of people wrong this season. He slimmed down.
Starter.
Yeah, he slimmed down. And when he did that, man, he reminded everybody why he was the number 1 pick.
Jenner, yeah.
And he's fun
talent.
and exciting. Yeah. Hopefully he can put it together on defense and really become somebody.
Hopefully. But to close it off, we're going to go to our East title contenders, where I have the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, and I have Boston as well as Milwaukee Bucks, and I also added the Brooklyn Nets into this conversation.
So I think here quickly, it's just Boston. They're probably arguably the most complete team. They arguably have the best point guard room or guard play in the league. With Malcolm Brogdon, Marcus Smart when healthy, Jaylen Brown. The Peyton Pritchard, Derek White. They have the guards there, even though Peyton Pritchard doesn't play. But they're probably the most complete team. Not to mention, you probably have an MVP candidate, arguably a top 5 player in the NBA in Jason Tatum, who's, I'm not gonna lie, I've never respected Jason Tatum as much as I have this year. I've always, I guess, underappreciated or just rated him way too low. But he's definitely putting me on notice this year. But I mean, when you have two guys like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum that average 28, 8, and 8, I mean, you're going to be a good team.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I didn't like Jason Tatum in college, believe it or not. I liked him once he got to the league. Once I really saw what he could become, I was like, he might be pretty special. And like you said, the guard play is amazing. Robert Williams, man, he's a dog on defense. Al Horford is that veteran presence that they needed. You could even say last year in the finals, they had the better team. They just lacked the experience and the execution.
And that literally could be the it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's rare that you see a team like Boston where Jason Tatum, obviously he's the undisputed number one on that team, but you don't see a team where, one night Jason Tatum is the one and then Jaylen Brown go off for a week straight and then you're like, well, who is the best player on the team?
Right.
In the finals, Jaylen Brown's probably the best player on the Celtics because Jason Tatum was struggling. I don't see that happening often, but that duo is really good. I'm happy for them. I didn't want them to get split up during the trade rumors. It just didn't make sense to me.
It's a good thing they didn't.
Yeah,
But very quick, Jason Tatum, top 5 player?
I believe so. I really think he's.
I think he might be outside for me. But Milwaukee Bucks, I mean, they just need to be healthy. They have the best player in the league, arguably the best core in the league of the top 3. I don't know if I'd go that far, but they have Giannis, Chris Middleton. He's coming back from that injury. He's finally getting games back under him. Jrue Holiday has kept them afloat when Giannis has missed some time, and so has Chris Middleton. And I guess the only person here I want to shout out is Bobby Portis. I mean, he's been amazing. He's the only person giving Russ a run for the Sixth Man of the Year award, and he's been a big reason why they're still top 4 seed despite all the injuries they've had this year.
Yeah, it is obviously it's not normal to see Giannis miss this many games. Usually he keeps himself well rested and he's not injury prone. So I'm sure this is something he's getting used to as well. But I mean, he's still putting up numbers, keeping them where they are. And shout out Jrue Holiday. He's the reason why the Bucks are content. I mean, Jrue Holiday, he's been really good this season. Once Chris Middleton comes back, I'm sure it'll take some time for him to fully get back to where he was, and as well, figure out where they go in a new offense that where Bobby Portis is more of a focal point, and Brook Lopez, he's a depoy. He's in depoy contention right now. I don't know what it is with the league now, but you see a lot of older guys
that are actually refining themselves.
Exactly. I mean,
like Horford.
Drew's like 32.
Yeah.
Brook Lopez was like 33.
CJ McCollum even
exactly.
He was a second option for many years, and he's now like the leader of that Pelicans team.
Yeah.
I guess we'll very quickly, because we are running a little bit longer here than I would like, but I didn't have Brooklyn as a title contender. I think strictly just because of we've seen the same song and dance from this team. I will say it is a completely different coach team. Mm-hmm. A lot of things when Brooklyn 2 years ago, they took Giannis to 7. They took that Bucks team that won the championship to 7 games, and if KD was one shoe size smaller, they're going to the finals. I think that a big thing in that playoff series and then the year after is that they had Steve Nash. He wasn't a great coach, great point guard, great player, Hall of Fame player. He just wasn't a great coach. He didn't adjust. So it was a debate for me to have them as title contenders because I want to see Kyrie win. I want to see KD win. And they do have Jacque Vaughn, who's a much better coach. Yeah. I just don't know, can they play Ben Simmons in the playoffs? Can they? Will Nick Claxton continue this play throughout the remainder of the year? I mean, at times we've seen Kyrie disappear, even though he's my favorite point guard of all time. At times we've seen guys like that disappear or just have bad shooting games. For that reason alone, I just went with the more trustworthy teams, which is Boston and Milwaukee, in my opinion.
Yeah, I put Brooklyn here. The way they've played this season, it just has a different feel, a different energy around it compared to seasons past where, they, on paper they're really talented and, you look at them, they're like, oh yeah, you're a contender, but they just haven't lived up to that.
Right.
And last year, they lost to the team that ended up going to the finals. I mean, but they got swept. All games were close.
Right.
But it just didn't feel right, and they had a lot of distractions going on at the beginning of the season. Even from the offseason, Kevin Durant didn't want to be there anymore. Kyrie made some comments that he shouldn't have made.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve Nash, like you said, he just didn't work out in Brooklyn. But Jacque Vaughn, he had he been coaching from game one, he would be coach of the year.
I think so.
He has this team playing a lot different. I mean, even the games KD and Kyrie missed, they're a competitive team. I really think guys like Royce O'Neal, Yuta Watanabe.
Right.
Nick Claxton's evolution as a player has been really good to see. Hopefully he can, develop at least a free throw line jumper.
Shout out Seth Curry too.
Yeah. Their team, listen, they got a lot of guys out of the locker room who didn't want to be there, who just didn't show interest, and I think that really helps because now they have a lot of guys who are bought in, and Kyrie, since he's been back from that suspension, has just been
amazing.
Yeah, he's probably playing the best ball of his career, which is crazy to say. Kevin Durant, I mean, he was an MVP candidate before he got hurt. He's an all-star starter for a reason. I think once he comes back, Kevin Durant, he's easy money. He's easy money. You don't. It doesn't take time for him to come back.
Right.
They're going to be scary in the playoffs, I believe.
Yeah, for sure. And then to close it off, I mean, we're just going to talk about our West title contenders, where I have the Denver Nuggets, Golden State Warriors, and the Los Angeles Clippers.
Yeah, I have the Golden State Warriors, Memphis Grizzlies, and the Los Angeles Clippers.
Very quickly, I mean, we've talked about the Nuggets, we've talked about the Grizzlies. I believe you guys got the gist on what we believe on those teams. For Golden State, I mean, they've been here before, and even though they're like the 9th seed right now in the West or the 8th seed, they're the Warriors, right? They've been here before. They won 4 championships with this core. This might be their last dance, so to speak, with the Curry, Clay, and Dre. So that's going to give them even more motivation going into the playoffs. And, I mean, just their offense, the way that everybody's constantly moving, nobody wants to play them. They have Steph Curry, who's arguably a top 10 player of all time. This team has been there before. They have the coaching. They have everything that you want. They could possibly make a move at the deadline, too, to get even better. Nobody wants to see the Warriors in the playoffs. I mean, it's simple as that for me. I mean,
you're complete. I agree with you 100%. I think they kind of felt like their young guys will take maybe a bigger,
Wiseman,
a bigger step forward than they have. And I mean, you got to remember those guys are just now turning 20 and 21, so they're still really young in their career, and there's still maybe multiple All-Stars on that team, but nobody wants to see Steph Curry in the playoffs. He's kind of proven, at the beginning of his career, and even when they started making those early finals runs, he never played the best in the finals, but last year really proved that he is still Steph Curry. He is still a difference maker. He's still him, as they say.
Yeah, right.
And I think people forget about Klay Thompson. He started playing last year, and he wasn't good in the regular season, but the playoffs, he was good when it mattered. He hit shots when it mattered. And, I get what they're doing. They don't want to risk injury. I'm still not sure why he hasn't played, back to back since then or at all this season. But, he's older, so I understand that. And, I think, like you said, this is probably their last run. I don't believe Draymond stays there his career. I think he's, even though he is the heart and soul.
The next Laker.
Yeah, he's the heart and soul. But, I think what he did at the beginning of the season kind of fractured his image to his teammates and the management. And he didn't really have the best image around the league beforehand, so that kind of hurt him. But shout out Jordan Poole. He started off slow, but when Steph was hurt, he really showed that he is baby Steph. He still takes erratic shots sometimes, but that's expected with a young player. I remember my dad's a huge Michigan. This is completely off topic. My dad's a huge Michigan fan, so. During March Madness, when Jordan Poole hit that game winner, I watched that live. And
was it a half court shot or was
it was about the 28-foot line.
Yeah,
it was a deep three banked in, and to hear about him a few years later, I remember thinking to myself, Jordan Poole was not a shifty playmaker in college. He was more of a catch and shoot type of guy. To see his evolution as a player, it's really fun. And you forget about Andrew Wiggins too. He was an All-Star starter last year. He may not have deserved the starting, but he got the All-Star nod. And I think if their young guys can really come along second half of this season back into the playoffs, they're still the Warriors. They're scary with or without them, but you give them those extra playmakers, extra pieces. Jonathan Kuminga has been playing well as of late too.
Yes.
They're scary. They're so scary.
Yeah, I mean, like, we all know how dangerous the Warriors are. We've talked about the Nuggets and the Grizzlies. But in my opinion, it was my preseason title favorite. I believe it is now still my title favorite. We're going to talk about the Los Angeles Clippers. I mean, when you got two top 10 guys, or talent-wise, in the league, when you got Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, I mean, people are starting to forget who Kawhi Leonard was as a player because he did miss so much time. And he did get so much heat for missing those games early in the season. But when you got Paul George as your second option, I mean, it makes you dangerous. They have the versatility to defend anybody, including the Warriors. And you guys, I mean, they have guys that are annoying to probably for offensive players to have them be defended by. So they have guys like Reggie Jackson, who's annoying. He's gritty, and he's going to chase Steph Curry around all game. Not saying he's going to lock Steph Curry down. Don't get me wrong, but I believe they have the defensive versatility and the offensive firepower to compete with anybody in any 7-game series. Kawhi Leonard's, he turns it up in the playoffs. I mean, he's been coming back after not playing, and he just casually drops 30 and 10 and then goes and sits for the next 5 games.
Yeah. I agree with you. I am a biased Paul George lifer. Paul George was one of my original favorite players when I started watching ball for real. I think you forget what this Clippers team 2 years ago, not last season, so the year before, during that playoff run, they almost made the finals. If Paul George makes one of the 2 free throws he misses, and
by himself,
exactly, and if Chris Paul doesn't have a career game in Game 6, this is a team that goes to the finals and plays the Bucks shorthanded without Kawhi, and they didn't have Norman Powell or any of these guys. It was Paul George and Reggie Jackson, Mr. What were they called? Mr. September, Mr. November,
right?
This team has only added depth since then. They have Norman Powell, Terrence Mann, who made a name for himself in those playoff runs. And look, last year they should have been in the playoffs again. If the play-in didn't exist, they would have been there. Pat Bev, a former Los Angeles Clipper, knocks them out of the playoffs, or his team does.
Acts like he won the finals.
Yeah, but I really believe in this Clippers team. I still have them as my favorites. I am a biased Paul George fan, so I want to see them win, but it's not about just being a Paul George fan. This team is a legit team, and they'll go on stretches where you're like, are they really that good of a team? And then they'll just come out for a 5, 6, 7 game stretch, and they will prove to you that they are that good of a team. They just they do it their way, and that's the load management way, but it works.
Right, and I believe like when you got the head coaching and Doc Rivers. Oh, no, not Doc Rivers.
Tyronn Lue.
Tyronn Lue, sorry. But when you have the veteran coaching for a guy that's won a championship, and he's been to Western Conference and Eastern Conference Finals, I believe when you have the veteran coaching, but then you also have the two monsters in Paul George and Kawhi that can guard any star player, anybody in the league.
Yeah.
Aside from probably Embiid and Jokic. But when you got a guy like Kawhi Leonard who can guard all the fantastic and superstar wings we have, like Jason Tatum, Giannis, LeBron, Kevin Durant, like he can slow those guys down. Where on Paul George, he could probably do just about the same job as Kawhi on those guys, but he's a little bit smaller. So I think if you put him on Steph Curry, Damian Lillard, John Morant, you could put him on all these superstar guards in the Western Conference or Eastern Conference, and he's gonna there's potential that Kawhi and Paul George can completely take a superstar out of the game, and that's only one of their stars.
Yeah,
and you still got another top 10 guy that can take you home.
Yeah, and I I'm happy for Paul George. He proved the haters wrong during that playoff run. They were calling him Pandemic P. The bubble was a hard time for everybody. Everybody has their different opinions about the bubble. But Paul George, he really proved once again why he led those Indiana Pacers teams to deep runs in the East against LeBron and on the Heat and on the Cavs. Paul George is a dynamic shot creator. He may be inconsistent, but he'll still get to his spots. And Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, as we know, 2 times Finals MVP.
Hall of Famer.
Yeah, sure. He turns it up when he in the playoffs. Like we said, he locked down Giannis on his way to a finals run. Beat a Steph Curry-led team in the finals. Even though Kevin Durant got hurt, it's still the Warriors, in their peak. So
I mean, yeah, like when we talk about just strictly Kawhi, I mean, when we went back to from 2005 or 6, let's say, LeBron was the best player from 2006 or 7 to or you can argue 2020, right? Until the season after the bubble, where there was only two guys that really challenged LeBron for the best player in the league in that time, and that was Kevin Durant and Kawhi Leonard. And I think people forget how good of a player he can be when he plays, and it just people forget that because he does sit so many games.
Yeah.
But that's going to do it for today's show. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed. For the first time in this podcast history, it wasn't just me talking to you guys for 40 minutes to an hour. So I want to thank you for coming out. It was very appreciated. Great talk. There was a lot of things you pointed out that I just flew past my head.
Yeah.
But let us know down below in the comments who do we have too high, who do we have too low, who are we underrating, overrating, etc., etc. It's always fun to debate with you guys down below. But if you like the show, drop a like on the stream, on the podcast, whatever you want to call it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, because I don't know if you're going to post this on your main story. I might do the same.
Yeah.
But we're going to get a lot of new listeners here to come across the channel, I guess is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
But turn those post notifications on, because we're going to have good shows coming up. I don't know if it's always going to be the two of us, if it's just always going to be one of us, whatever. We have some good stuff in store, so stay tuned for that. But we will see you guys on Thursday, which I'm not sure what we're going to cover yet, if you're going to be here, if you're busy or whatever. But I will say we're going to cover the Super Bowl on the 9th. Thursday's usually our football show, but we might push it off because it is the Pro Bowl. Who really cares about the Pro Bowl? But any last thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show.
You plan on being here long?
I do. I plan on making
right.
appearances. When I can. Hopefully one day that is full time.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I enjoy every aspect of this. We appreciate the support of the channel, everything.
Right.
Like you said, we're trying to reach a whole new world, and we couldn't do that without you guys. So.
Yeah, right. So, but until Thursday, thank you guys for coming out. Thank you for. This is going to be the longest episode ever, but it's probably the most productive episode and the highest quality episode as far as talk. But until Thursday, stay happy, stay healthy. We're out.